Right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Enefirst webinar on energy efficiency first, single stage vs stepwise renovation and the question of rapid energy saving actions. This webinar is the last of a series which took place between March and April. So I invite you to check the materials from the two previous webinars that are available on the Enefirst website. I'm Margot from the Buildings Performance Institute Europe, and today I'm joined by Ina Maya and Lucas Kronzel from TU Vienna and Jean-Sébastien from the IECP. We already have quite a good amount of people on this webinar, which is great. So I'll quickly go over a few housekeeping items. So you should be able to see something that looks like this on your screen. So on the upper right corner of your screen, you're listening using your computer system by default, but you can also join using the phone by selecting telephone in the audio panel. You'll have the opportunity to submit questions by typing your questions onto the question box. You can send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and we will collect and address them during the different Q&A sessions today. We'll also send you the slides along with the recording directly to your inbox tomorrow. The slides and recording will also be available on the Enefirst website. Now onto the agenda for today. We will first have a short introduction of the energy efficiency first principle and the Enefirst project by Jean-Sébastien. And then we'll then hand over to Ina and Lucas for the core presentation of today, which is on single stage versus stepwise renovation. We'll have two Q&A sessions, so please don't hesitate to ask any questions during this webinar. And then that will be the end of the webinar at 3 p.m. Yeah, as I mentioned, this is the third and last webinar of the series. So the two other webinars materials are available on the website. And that is all from me for now. I'll now hand over to Jean-Sébastien. Jean-Sébastien, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Margot, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this webinar. I'm sure that there will be many interest and many questions today. That's a kind of burning topic these days. But before I hand it over to the TU Vienna team, just some brief introduction about the energy efficiency first principle and the Enefirst project. So in the energy efficiency first project, we used the following definition, and I could summarize it very briefly, saying that the objective is to making sure that demand side and supply side resources are on a level playing field. And that's what you can see here through the term equal opportunity. That deals with decision principles. So that's about comparing different options and making a choice, with the idea of giving a priority to demand side resources whenever they are more cost effective. And we will see that it's not so easy to assess. Next slide, please. There are the two next slides, this one and the next one, illustrate key aspect of the principle when you want to implement it. The first one is to consider energy systems as a whole. So it means to look at supply side and demand side resources all together, taking into account their interactions, the impact that one can have on the other, and also comparing them, as I said earlier, on a fair basis. Next slide, please. And the second aspect is when you assess these options and compare them, of course, the investor's point of view is taken into account, but also when the policies are designed to support the implementation of the energy efficiency first principle, it's about considering a societal perspective, which we would say mean considering multiple impacts. So not only the direct energy impacts, for example, reducing greenhouse gases emissions, improve health, etc., and adopting a long-term perspective. So looking also not with a perspective to 3 to 5 years, but up to at least 2050, which is the new long-term horizon with the goal of climate neutrality for Europe. Next slide, please. And this principle might seem quite straightforward to mention, but that's another story when trying to implement it. So what we came with after looking at different examples and the challenges that arise in the path for implementation, we came out with these 3 questions that more or less summarize the main issues to address to implement the energy efficiency first principle. The first one is to make sure that demand side resources that include energy efficiency and demand response are systematically considered when you deal with an investment related to energy. The second one is to make sure that the demand side resources are assessed and valued on a fair basis, especially compared to the way supply side investments are assessed and valued. And the third one is about ensuring that there is no bias in the decision making, and that whenever relevant, even a priority is given to demand side resources. So especially when it is demonstrated that it is cost effective. Next slide, please. So that was about the principle. Now about the Enefirst project. You can see here the main objectives and ultimately the objective to develop policy proposals, and that's what will be presented in June at the final conference. And this series of webinars that Margot already presented is focused on the objective of quantifying the potential impacts of implementing energy efficiency first. So what are the quantitative implications of the principles? And overall, another important reminder is that Enefirst is focused on buildings, so meaning the end use, energy end use in buildings, and how these end use are met. So considering also the energy supply, as energy efficiency first is about this integrated approach to consider energy use and energy supply all together. And you will find in this slide on the website later on the links to other resources on energy efficiency first. About the team of this project, you can see the 7 partners of the consortium. Here they are presented around 2 streams, but we are all working together on all aspects. There is a policy analysis stream that is led by RAP, BPIE, and CEU, the Central European University, and a modeling stream that is led by Fraunhofer ASAIC together with TU Vienna and IRIS. And today we have the chance to get a presentation by TU Vienna about one of the case studies they have modeled. And I have myself the pleasure to be the coordinator with IACP of this project. Next slide, please. To finish with this introduction, you can also find on the website the proceeding of a workshop we organized in February, where the other part of the modeling work done in this project was presented. So this webinar series was about different case studies, modeling case studies with specific questions. And in February, we presented the results from, let's say, a more top-down approach, presenting results from EU scenarios. And I hope we'll have the pleasure to meet you in person in Brussels on the 31st of May and 1st of June for the special conference on energy efficiency first that is jointly organized with the Synergies project, that is another Horizon 2020 project dealing with energy efficiency first. And probably Margot will put in the chat the link to register to this conference. That's not public yet, so that's a kind of a preview, but you can already register from today with this link. And the next slide is just a screenshot from the website to show you that there are plenty of resources that you can find there about the principle. And with that, I have the pleasure to hand it over to Ina Maya, who will start the core presentation of today about stepwise versus single stage renovation. Ina, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can see my screen. We have a little delay. Yeah, so
Yes,
yes.
that's perfect. Full screen.
Thank you. Then I will start this first presentation today. Then Lucas Kranzer, my colleague, will take over in the second part, which is mainly about the energy efficiency first and the single stage versus stepwise renovation and the question of rapid energy actions. The motivation of our study was, basically, you know, that mainly that, I'm sorry, I think, that cost optimality calculations are currently used method to assess the cost effectiveness of performing different energy performance measures in buildings, especially used for calculating new buildings or also single stage renovations. However, empirical evidences have showed that in real life, stage renovations are mostly performed. What you see here in the graph below is the volume of euros invested in different renovation types or refurbishment types here used, and for different building typologies. Especially in the residential buildings, you see that the higher volume of invested euro or capital is on the partial renovation, which means that not the single stage renovation is performed and not all the building is renovated at once, but partially. And the EPPD has already recognized this evidence and introduced the building renovation passports as an instrument to cover this evidence. So these are the key questions that we want to discuss here in this webinar. Which are the opportunities and challenges for single stage versus stepwise renovation activities, and how does it mean for achieving cumulated energy savings? What are the opportunities and barriers for really speeding up energy savings, in particular gas savings, also due to the current political context, and what are the implications for the energy efficiency first principle? Then I would like to start with this poll. You are invited to provide the answers in the chat, where you are asked, what do you think that stepwise renovation should be supported by member states? Or sorry, do you think it should be supported by member states? Yes, but single stage renovation should remain the preferred option. Yes, but proper planning is required. No, stepwise renovation prevents deep renovation, or I don't know. Margot, could you help me with the answers, because I cannot see them in the chat?
Normally you should be able to see the responses under the polls sections. Otherwise, I'm happy to give the results. So far we have 19% voted yes, 48% voted yes, but proper planning is required, and 14% I don't know. And we have 9% and 9% for the two other answers, which are yes, but single stair renovation must remain the first option, and also 9% for no, stepwise renovation prevents deep renovation. So we have the biggest answer would be yes, but proper planning is required.
This is very interesting. I will then give some insights from our perspective in the conclusion. So I just continue the presentation. Just a quick overview about the building passport and the stepwise renovation. So when we are talking about roadmaps, building roadmaps, we are trying to see the building from the individual perspective, and the renovation is considered that the stepwise increasement of the energy efficiency and the carbon intensity of the building are stepwise increased due to the set of different measures. And well, from the modeling perspective, it's important to see then not only this roadmap, but also details on this roadmap. So basically, we talk about the number of steps that also are also relate to the how fast the final goal and the energy savings will be achieved, the combination of measures per step, the sequence of the steps, and also the time when each step is performed. We have modeled and developed a model where we deliver the different time for it, the optimal time for each step. So in the graph here, you see the effect on the accumulated energy savings, which are the gray areas. We have here 4 buildings for the optimal steps in different sequence of steps. Basically, for each building, we try to understand the energy savings impacted by the dependency between the steps or the independence between the steps. In general, we can say that the optimal timing depends on several aspects. Besides the time and the age of the building, also the material lifetime, also the previous renovation measures, and therefore the current standard of the building when the roadmap is defined, especially individual aspects of the owner or the building user as the budget restrictions. But for today, we will focus on the time of performing the steps, and we'll understand or discuss about the effects of that on related to the economic effectiveness of cost optimal roadmaps. The general approach used was first to set a energy demand calculation, or calculate the energy demand for several packages, and also several combination of measures. And for each of these measures and combinations, we defined also the costs. The costs were here also differentiated between energy-related investment costs, which are the investments mainly due to the energy efficiency increasement, and also the energy running costs, which are the costs related to the doing the use of the building. Then for different standards of building elements, for example, we consider the insulation for the roof of different level thicknesses. The cost optimal option and variant were chosen. And finally, we compared the stepwise and the single stage, which is also, I would say, the main focus of today's presentation, where we try to understand the implication of the energy prices and also the riskness of interrupting the roadmap due to economic effectiveness. For this presentation, I will also focus on one construction period, but more information, more detailed information about all these methods, and also for applied for different construction periods, will be documented in a paper which will be published by the middle of this year. So here I show you the measures considered and their different energy efficiency standards. As I said, we have different categories: the building envelope, the heat supply system, and the generation system, energy generation systems installed in the building. For different, we closely looked at the building envelope measures and for the cost optimal calculation, especially on different insulation ranges. We began with 10 meters with 10 centimeters insulation and increase it stepwise until 30, for example, for the roof, and considered as energy supply system the heat pump and also the installation of a PV system. Consider all the measures we had then in the total of 270 variants, including the different energy price levels, and also we will then also consider the time of the measures. Well, the first step was to set the possible roadmaps. It's then the first question that arises the number of steps, but not to make it very long, which also increases the risk of interrupting the risk map. We decided to set it in 2 or 3 steps. And then for combining the different measures in a single step, we considered technical specificalities of the implementation, which turned out then to this, I would say, empirical roadmaps. For example, what you see is a roadmap of 2 steps where we have first the building envelope, then at least in the second step, the heating system together with the PV installation, or in a 3 steps where we have first the measures performed in the upper ceiling and PV installation, then facade and windows, mainly due to also the difference of the overhang and that can be and the installation of the insulation, which is important from the technical perspective, and finally the measures that would be on the cellar ceiling and the heating system together. Now I show you the results on the effect of the primary energy affected by the different energy related investment costs. In this scenario here, I show you the single stage scenario versus 4 options for the stepwise renovations. As I said before, the roadmaps are divided in 2 or 3, and the variants say about the package in a step. So it's about the combination. And here a fixed sequence is considered. So what you see is for the current state, we have going from about 260 kilowatt hours per square meter per year primary energy. We have then the single stage approach with the considered energy related investment costs for that. And for example, in the variant 3.1, we go slowly and stepwise increasing the primary energy and also decreasing the primary energy and increasing the energy related investment costs. When you go for the first step from upper ceiling with a PV system, then the facade with windows, and then finally the heating systems with cellar ceiling insulation. In general conclusions, we can say that if all steps are performed, the stepwise roadmaps can have or has a higher total investment costs, especially due to the frequent building site costs that will, for each build site, will have to consider as fixed costs. And in the green circle, you see that the stepwise roadmaps have the risk of being interrupted when we have considered relevant primary energy or savings are already achieved, are already relevant and we say good, but with lower investment costs. So this is a risk that we have in the stepwise. Then for the next results, we will then included the step, the time of each step, which also led us to consider the global costs, which are the costs during the building lifetime. And we went from yearly primary energy demand to accumulated energy demand. So the first step was to set the year. We have the blue point showing the current state. Then we considered five variants for the single step, where we have the single step being performed at the year 0, 5, 10, 15, and 20. In the graphs, I show you the 0 and the 20. Then we consider that for the second steps, we have the first step being performed in the year 0 and the second in the year 10. And in the three steps roadmaps, we have the steps being performed in year 0, 5, and 10. This led us to the first results related to the implication of the energy price levels. The consideration was here also a building lifetime of 30 years, and also a period of 30 years with the gas price at 60 cents per kilowatt hours, and the electricity price is 32 euro per kilowatt hours. Then what you see in the left graph is for the year 0. The single stage has the best, we would say the best option, and the lower accumulated energy demand, as well as the lower global cost, accumulated global cost. But going to the right and increasing it, and considering that the single stage is performed each 5 years, we have then the increase. On the other hand, we have on the right graph, I show you the stepwise increase of performing the measures. That comes out that especially for the two options, the stepwise renovations are more or less similar in terms of global cost and primary energy than the single stage. And we have three options which are performed in the year 10, 15, and 20, which are less interesting. Then changing the energy gas price, we have the current state line shows that all options are below this graph, which means that all measures are less efficient than the current state. But when we change the gas price to the current gas prices, we have the single stage having, as well as the stepwise renovations, being cost effective. But the single stage that are performed later are not that cost effective. So coming to the conclusions, I would say that all depends on the right time. Single stage renovation only creates higher accumulated savings if it's carried out fast. In practice, this will not be the case for a sufficiently large number of buildings. This is the reason why it's important to plan the renovation roadmaps and therefore use the individual building renovation roadmaps. At the same time, the single stage renovation also needs to be promoted, but not only preferred option to achieve energy and climate targets. And if regarding the question if it's all about economics, yes, but it also, we have to deal with uncertainty. So the energy price levels change everything, and also the result, the energy prices are by nature uncertain, and also about the energy supply and security, including the co-benefits. Thank you very much, and we come up to the questions.
Thanks a lot, Ina. I think that's very, very interesting, especially in the current context. And there were some graphs that are very illustrative of the questions that policymakers are currently facing. Maybe the first question is when looking at the different roadmaps you have presented, so maybe they are not representative of all the roadmaps you have covered in the case study, but it seems that you selected the ones that are optimal in a sense, I mean, in the order, in the sequence of actions. And coming back to what you did, the argument saying that single stage is not always possible, so we should consider also stepwise renovations. That's a bit the same. One could say that in practice, the first action to be done is to replace the heating system. While if I've seen well your the roadmaps you have considered, it's always put in the last part of the roadmap because I assume it's the optimal way to do. So did you also simulate one roadmap with heating system as the first action just to verify that it would have negative impacts?
Yeah, maybe I can come to, so for this study, we considered this fixed roadmap. So we did not in this case calculate it for the first as the heating system, but indeed we've here in this previous study we considered different sequences, and there we did consider the step one being the heating system, and the for example the third one being other measures. The point here in this case is when you change the heating system without changing the envelope, you may have for a long time over dimensioned building system or heating system that will probably work inefficiently. So that's the reason why, from the technical point of view, many experts suggest first to perform measures that are in the building envelope, then to change the heating system. But I'm aware that it's not what happens in real life, due to probably the lifetime of the heating system, that they have shorter lifetime than the building envelope materials. So this was also considered in the model.
Okay. No, I understand that it was implicit in the choices of the roadmap, but that's always useful to remind. So thanks a lot for this very clear answer. And maybe if you can go back to slide 13. There was one question here, because if, unless I'm mistaken, the roadmap 3.2 is the one where you could get results in terms of efficiency that would be close to the single stage renovation with a lower cost. And the reason why it would be less costly is because there would be one part of the renovation that is not done at the end. Is it so, or?
Yeah, what we have here in this, for example, in this roadmap, in the orange one, we have one step that could be closer indeed to the single stage, and it could be already considered. I think this step is the step where all the building envelope measures are performed, and there you already have very close to the energy saving to the single stage. And you could, I hope I understood the question correctly. But I agree with this being the closest with the single stage.
And there is one part of the 3.2 in that case that will not be done, right? Because the end would be in the red circle, right?
Exactly here, yes.
Okay. So it also raised the question whether the last actions are cost effective or not.
Yeah, exactly. This is the what I call the risk, that in these cases we do not the building owner, or while performing the roadmap, it stops here, because in terms of effectiveness, performing the second step would be already then less effective than the single stage.
Okay. And again, coming back to the issue that in practice the roadmap could start with heating system, I think the study that was done in Ireland for their heat study, the one done by the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, had a similar conclusion for some cases where if you do the replacement of the heating system first, then it's much less cost effective to do the other actions. So it put definitely at risk the overall
Because
renovation.
probably you have to consider an additional step of replacing the heating system again after the envelope measures are performed.
Okay. Now that's very, very interesting. And okay, that raised many questions, but maybe we go to the second part of the presentation because the time is also passing by. So we can invite Lucas to continue, and we can come back to the question at the end. Thanks a lot, Ivna.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. I have the pleasure to add some additional thoughts on the opportunities and challenges for quickly reducing energy demand, in particular gas demand. Ina showed that the energy price levels can change more or less everything, and we are facing currently this energy price increase, the strong price energy increase, and also the risk of possible energy supply cuts. This night we heard that for Poland and Bulgaria the Russian gas supply was cut. And so there is a series of studies just coming out in the recent weeks and very few months, trying to analyze what can be done really on the short term in terms of demand side adjustment and supply side adjustment of getting more independent of, in particular, Russian gas supply in this case. And Peter Kotek from REC put together the results of several of these studies. And what we can see so far is that each of these studies, more or less, each of these studies includes some measures, at least, also in the building sector. So some demand side reductions in the building sector, both via heat pumps or via energy efficiency improvement, or also through other measures, like in particular behavioral changes. This is the case for some studies even this year, so even in the very short term. And now, next slide, please. We can ask ourselves, okay, what are these options to really reduce quickly gas demand for space and water heating? So we have first behavioral changing, reducing indoor temperature, optimizing ventilation, hot water use. I think we can also add here these low-cost measures like weather stripping of windows, decreasing or increasing air tightness of bad and old windows. Next point, please, is we can try to increasingly use already existing secondary heating systems. We need, you know, that in particular in rural areas, people have secondary heating systems like tile stoves or wood-based stoves or similar. this might be an option. Next bullet point, please. We can try to optimize existing heating systems. We know there are a lot of losses in the also due to inefficient maintenance or not sufficient maintenance and inefficient distribution also of heat within the building or inefficient control strategy. So that's also a measure. Next bullet point, please. But then we also come to measures which are a bit more investment intensive, like for example solar thermal, or next bullet point please, the replacement of gas boilers by heat pumps and district heating. Next bullet point please. Or building retrofitting, the increase of building retrofitting. And next bullet point please. Finally, the replacing of gas in district heating supply. And it's quite clear, I guess, that the first 3 bullet points can be carried out more in the short term, whereas the second 4 bullet points need more time, more planning, more investments. And now the question is, okay, we know these measures exist, but somehow we also would need to trigger them. What are the policy instruments to make them happen? Next slide, please. And so we thought, okay, we could maybe this matrix here helps a bit of understanding how different instruments, which are in the columns, may trigger the different measures which we have discussed on the slide before in terms of the different, more or less short-term measures. And yeah, so there are information awareness raising campaigning, which are in particular relevant for the behavioral changes, but then of course also for the increased uptake of heating system replacements, even building retrofitting. Then I think one point that is often a bit neglected are nudging measures. And what I mean is, for example, just inviting and proposing building owners a certain date for their energy advice support, and they are invited to the meeting, and also are invited to come up and develop together a certain renovation roadmap in a form that Ina showed before. So I think this more active involvement and approaching building owners would be very important. Of course, subsidies, the price signal is relevant, but we also know that the price signal has only an impact if people really realize it fast. So monthly billing would be, at least monthly billing would be important. Of course, also regulation, in particular in terms of fossil fuel gas phase out. Also, building retrofitting is a measure which is more and more becomes more and more relevant. Also, the EPBD. The proposed recast of the EPBD foresees the mandatory minimum energy performance standards. And then I think what we now already see in the short term, there is a shortage of labor force, there is a shortage of technologies, materials, components, and this needs to be addressed as well, which is relevant also not for the behavioral changes, but for sure for all the measures which need some installation next click, please. And now we can. I already tried to discuss in the slide before. We have certain time constraints for some of the measures. Really short term, I think it's only possible for the behavioral changes, the increasing use of secondary heating systems, to some extent optimizing existing heating systems. All the other measures need at least for the large scale uptake, I think, some more time. And next click, please. And the same is true for the policy instruments. They also have some time constraints, some lead times to really having an impact. And now we can see, okay, where do we have both in the rows and in the columns short-term measures? And then I think it becomes clear that it's reducing to the behavioral changes strongly to some extent the optimization of existing heating systems. Even for the price signals, I think it's not. The question is whether the change to monthly billing can be implemented really on the very short term. Next slide, please. And this leads me to the conclusion. So first, I think it's clear that the quick gas demand reductions in the building sector require a strong commitment of the building occupants. The measures that are relevant for this short-term demand reduction, gas demand reductions, need the active involvement of the building occupants. And what now in the context of this webinar and this project and the energy efficiency first principle, I think is also relevant that we again see, I mean, we already knew it before, but now we realize it even more drastically, that the building sector has long lead times, and this needs strong and long-term planning of actions. And to my mind, we see now that in the past, myopic considerations have been dominating, but these myopic economic considerations are no good advisor when it comes to long-term decisions. And the question is, what does it now imply for the understanding, definition, and implementation of the energy efficiency first principle? And I want to quote just briefly from the proposal for a revised energy efficiency directive. The proper application of the principle requires using the right cost-benefit analysis methodology. And as Sebastian also said, Jean-Sebastian said before, from the context of the Enefirst project, we defined that the energy efficiency first principle means that priority demand side resources should be given whenever they are more cost effective from a societal perspective. And for me, looking at this strong energy price increases that we have seen, and where Ina also showed this impact on this huge impact on the economic effectiveness of efficiency measures, we need to consider these uncertainties. In particular regarding prices, but not only regarding prices, but also simply regarding the availability of energy carriers. And to my mind, what we face now in terms of natural gas could also happen in the future in terms of hydrogen or something else. So I think these considerations are important, and frankly, I'm also still a bit puzzling and not sure to which extent this can and will be integrated in these economic considerations in the context of the energy efficiency first principle. To my mind, that's a huge challenge, and I would be happy if we could discuss it briefly in the Q&A session now.
Thanks a lot, Lucas. Maybe before we enter into this more open discussion, there were a few more specific questions in the chat, and maybe we go from the easiest to answer to the one that will require probably more discussion, more explanation. So the first one in that case would be: is there a database in the EU with state-of-the-art EUI data, so energy use intensity data, comparable to the US Energy Star data for specific building and space types? So I don't know if you.
I'm not aware of it. At least I have to say. I mean.
Well, I would say that at national level, there are the Odyssey data for sure.
Yes. And I mean, there are, but.
And then you have the databases of energy performance certificates, but that probably depends on each country then how.
Yeah, so the energy performance certificate databases, I would say there are very different handled from country to country, from member state to member state, and also in terms of accessibility. There are a few countries where accessibility is high and very openly managed, like Denmark or UK, and most of the countries where this is not the case. But I'm also not sure to which extent the APC databases really also are comparable with the Use Energy Star database.
And then you have also the European Observatory. But that's also a different way to present the data. The next question about your part of the presentation, Lucas, is about short-term savings. And one participant asked whether, given the time of the year, it would be relevant to consider cooling loads as well. So I don't know if you want to comment on that.
I was muted. Sorry, yes, I know that this is also discussed in some countries like Italy more actively now to not only try to achieve, starting maybe with public buildings, but also trying to raise awareness in private buildings, let's say lower indoor temperature levels in winter, but also higher indoor temperature levels in summer, which would of course reduce electricity loads and resulting use of gas-fired power plants during summer as well. I agree. Yeah, for me it's a bit more difficult to assess actually the possible result of it, but for sure it's given. Yeah, it's also relevant.
And maybe before we come back to the open discussion that you raised in your presentation, Lucas, there are two questions that that were saved and that were related to the first part, to Ina's presentation. Two questions or comment actually. The first one, I read it. I would assume that energy efficiency first in renovation means dealing with the insulation first and purchase the heating system when one is aware of the real needs. Isn't this correct? So I think that's something that we addressed more or less already in the previous discussion about the type of roadmaps that were investigated in this study. And we can also refer here to the Irish example where they have defined what they call the fabric first approach that is in line with this comment. So that you need to meet first a minimum energy performance level for the building before being eligible for subsidies for the heating system. And in that case, in Ireland, that's for heat pumps. So I don't know.
Yeah, and maybe just one
Lucas, if you want to comment on that, yes, please.
Yeah, one comment on it, because I think I thought also already during the discussion you had before with Ina about that point. To my mind, one of the costs that we are currently facing, the costs of not acting in the past, is also that now facing this possible gas supply shortages, high gas prices, we need to turn partly this ideal order, because we just need to do everything what is possible to reduce gas demand, which is also then first changing the heating system, and only because it's to some extent at least it's the measure that can be done faster. Now, but I completely agree. Energy efficiency first principle would mean the other order. Yes.
And your comment make a nice transition with the other comment put in the chat by Alexander Delianis. In practice, building owners replace the heating system first because this seems easier, less intrusive, while there are often readily available offers and subsidies for system replacement. Wouldn't putting energy efficiency first require change in such policies? To provide another example, facilitating teleworking should precede building more roads or subsidizing cars. So that I think that's also in line with what you say, even if there would be maybe a different view what should be prioritized right now due to the current energy crisis?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with the comment, and I also would say that yeah, it's not only because it's simpler for the single building owner, but it's also in terms of availability of stuff and materials, simpler to on the whole building stock and heating system stock level, simpler to change heating systems than to very quickly renovating buildings. But at the same time, I mean, we need to do everything that we can right now, but it will mean, I think, that we also will change this ideal order of measures.
And I think that's also one of the conclusions from the Irish study, the heating study. But that's difficult to find probably the right balance. One point that you raised in your presentation, Lucas, was about also the timing, or let's say the different time frame for the policies, and the ones that can be more easily launched than others. And you mentioned the issue of price signals and the difference depending on how the energy is invoiced and based on meter data or not. And do you think that there could be that there could be a kind of shock to the consumers in countries where the actual consumption is revised only once a year or only twice a year? So meaning that the increase that has been encountered recently will only be transferred to customers maybe later.
Sure. I'm sure this will be the case. Yeah, and I mean, at the same time, the topic is very much on the agenda right now, but still people don't, or only partly see it in their bills. They see it when they go to the gasoline station for filling their car, but they don't currently see it in their gas bill. No, yeah, or only partly. No, so I think that's that will be a topic, or might be a topic for depending on how the billing exactly works.
And when you mentioned that the options, the 4 options on the top are easier, or let's say quicker to implement than the 4 ones on the bottom, in a sense, there are anyway part of the buildings that are renovated already, because we have at least a minimum share of buildings that are renovated each year, and that can be increased to some extent. So how does it compare the potential that you can get from that? So considering, let's say, a reasonable increase, so linking to what you mentioned about the possible shortage in terms of workforce and materials, etc. So how does this, let's say, small or incremental increase in the renovation rate compare to behavioral measures, for example?
We're currently trying to evaluate it in a small project, but I don't have yet the results available. But I expect that the potential impact of the behavioral changes is higher than let's say a realistic increase of the renovation rate. At the same time, I don't want to say that it's easier to achieve, because as I said, now it needs this commitment and activity of building occupants, and this needs to be somehow triggered, and I'm not sure whether and how and to which extent this can happen. And it also needs to be considered that in part of the buildings already now is not sufficiently heated, I would say. So I think there is also a restriction on that side, which needs to be considered in that discussion.
And maybe the last question would come back to the issue you raised at the very end of your presentation, pointing the uncertainties and especially the huge importance of the energy prices in the assumptions when you make the assessment of cost effectiveness. So looking at that, then what would be your suggestions or your recommendation to combine still input for quantitative assessments while also considering these major uncertainties?
So I think, to my mind, what the minimum what should be done is trying to, as far as possible, trying to consider different energy price levels. And that's difficult because if we would have suggested considering doubling the gas price a few, let's say 1 year ago, it wouldn't have looked very reasonable. And nobody knows what the future will bring. And but still, I think somehow these uncertainties need to be reflected in quantitative analysis and plus added by qualitative discussions of the results. What of these uncertainties is included and what not, and also what of the co-benefits and is included and what not. Yeah.
And is there, in the analysis you have done, would it be possible to identify a level of energy prices that would make that, let's say, an ambitious level of renovation would become no regret anyway? So instead, would the reverse approach work? Instead of looking at different energy prices, etc., looking at what is the, let's say, break-even energy prices in the equation?
Okay. Yeah. Well, we haven't done it so far. We just took, let's say, the prices from 1-2 years ago and current prices. No, but you're right. That could be an interesting analysis to at least also guide a bit for which type of measures, for which type of buildings, for which type of measures in which type of buildings, which energy price level would trigger certain measures. And but still, and then the decision would need to be taken again by the decision maker, about possible future price levels.
Okay, thanks a lot, Lucas, and thanks also to Ina. Thanks to both of you for the very interesting presentation. We have now come to the end of the webinar. We are just a bit after 3 p.m. I also thank all the participants for attending, for your questions. I hope you found this interesting. And Margot, if you want to close the webinar, thanks a lot for hosting it.
Just say a very few words. Thanks everyone for joining today. We had quite a good discussion. We'll be sharing the slides and the recording tomorrow by email, but it will also be available on the Enefirst website. And don't forget the Enefirst final conference, which will take place on the 1st of June in Brussels and online. So thanks a lot again and have a nice rest of the day. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot, Margot. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.